So I really think that one of the things that can help us live out the virtues is our intellectual life, what stories especially that we surround ourselves with. Hello, welcome to another episode of Intermarifica, New Mexico, the channel where we look at questions of wonder from the perspectives of faith and reason, philosophy and theology. I'm your host, Daniel Kelly, and what we'll be discussing today is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially after while I was preparing and researching for my video on hope, and there'll be a link to that in the description. But how can we safeguard these virtues in our heart? And one thing that really came out to me in making that video was stories help us live virtue. That's one of the big purposes of stories, right, is to help us be virtuous, right? We have themes of justice in a lot of our stories because we want our children in our community to seek out justice. We have stories of charity, of, all these things. But one of the things that I've found that really helps with keep that virtue of hope that we've discussed. So hope is the virtue of keeping our eyes on what will truly fulfill us, on what will really make us happy, and not letting it fall, giving our heart to all these things that won't really fulfill us. And what stories can we look at that would help us keep that virtue of hope? Well, strange as it may seem, I think that tragedies often help us keep our eyes on what is important, right? When bad things happen to us in our lives, it kind of strips away when we're putting our hopes in silly things or things that aren't really important, to focus on, oh, what I really find is important is God, and I shouldn't have been worrying about those silly things anyway. So tragedy helps keep our mind very often on what really fulfills us, tragedy and hardship. But the problem here is that obviously we're not allowed to seek out tragedy and hardship, right? We pray to God, lead us not into temptation. Jesus said, if they persecute you in one city, flee to the next, right? And we're not supposed to, in a way, seek out martyrdom, right? And St. Thomas More is a great example of that, where he tries really, really hard every way that he can to not be martyred. And he is in the end anyway. So we're not supposed to seek out tragedy and hardship, but we've seen that these things do help us to grow. Well, one thing to keep both those principles in line, that hardships help us grow and see things, right? But we're not supposed to seek it out, is stories that do that. So I'm not a big one for stories and books and movies that have sad endings. I'm like Tolkien. Tolkien said that he liked happy endings. It's funny because some of his stories really don't have very happy endings, but I'm like him. I think that happy endings are much more realistic to life, because in life, the good guys, God, the good guy, does win at the end. I do think stories with happy endings are more realistic, because the resurrection and the end of time is a happy ending, but there is the sad ending many times in our lives of Good Friday and things like that. So these sad stories sometimes help us keep that part of reality in our mind, and that helps us to keep hope. And so what I wanted to do today is go over 5 stories that I found really, really help foster this virtue of hope. And they're not really, I'm going to present them in no particular order, but just go over them really quickly. The first story that I wanted to kind of go over with you is C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle. It's the last of his Narnia story, and it's written for children like all of his Narnia stories, so you might not realize at first that it's all about the bad guys winning. That's what the story is about, is the bad guys winning in terms of earthly aspirations and stuff. And I think this story is a great antidote to this kind of prosperity gospel attitude, where if I do what God wants me to do, he's going to bless me. And it is true that if you follow God's ways, he's going to bless you, but not necessarily. Sometimes we get in the wrong-headed thinking of he's going to bless us in a material way in our lives. Well, The Last Battle is all about people, and it's surprisingly dark subject matter for a children's story, but I think handled really well, is that it's all about people doing what God wants them to do. Well, they fail sometimes, is realistic, but they're striving to do what God wants them to do, good people striving to do what he wants, and they fail, in a way, but they fail. It's all about them failing. Now, I wouldn't strictly call it a tragedy, and that's one of the reasons I'm starting with it, is because he does bring in the theocentric viewpoint where it does end happily because God, in the end, is your main goal anyway, not any of these smaller material goals, right? But I really like it. I really like it because it teaches the true virtue of hope to us sometimes when we're young. And I want to talk about this story more in the future, and I'm gonna make more videos on it. But just it shows us that just because we're doing God's will, that doesn't mean we're going to get these lesser blessings of material prosperity and happy. And well, we do get happiness in this life, but not pleasurable happiness, if that kind of makes sense. So that's one story, The Last Battle, that I think really helps instill in us this correct virtue of hope. Now, the next one I want to talk about is one I've talked about before, but I think it's a really, really good one. It's The Stone and the Flute by Hans Behmen. It's originally in German, but the English translation is called The Stone and the Flute. This is a very long book. It's kind of like if you've ever read The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. It's a long book along those lines, but it's basically focusing on this whole person's life. It takes from when he's a baby to when he dies. And it's his whole story and journey of seeking for fulfillment. And it's a very sad story because all the ways he tries to find fulfillment aren't ways that really fulfill you, and the story shows it very well. And a lot of it you can see ahead of time as a reader, this is not going to fulfill him, but it's so realistic and so true to our human condition, and we do it. You can see yourself in this story, which I really, really like. You see yourself in the main character's named Listener. You can see yourself in him, and you can see the times where you've sought those things that aren't really going to fulfill you, right? And so I love this story because it just peels away those layers in our heart of placing our heart in these things, these material things, or these, if I get the right wife, or if I get I'd just be happier if my wife was nicer, or if I was rich, or all these things. Well, it goes through all those things. He's seeking all those things, and it very realistically shows that these are not things that fulfill the human heart. And in that way, it's a very, very sad story, but I highly recommend it. One of my favorite books. The next two are going to get a little bit darker because both of those stories that I just talked about show forth hope more clearly, especially towards the end, especially C.S. Lewis. But these two books, the next two books, are actually by Tolkien. And Tolkien, he doesn't like sad endings, but these two books have sad endings, and they're two of my favorite of his. They're ones he never published, but they were edited and released by his son, Christopher Tolkien. So the first one is The Children of Hein, and he actually had completed as a novel. He had submitted it to people, but nobody really picked it up, and we could go through the whole history of that. It's very interesting of how it went about, but it's a great story. It's about they're fighting against basically the evil guy in Middle Earth way before Sauron or any of the the whole Lord of the Rings tale. This is where they're fighting the original bad guy, Morgoth, and he's really, really evil because he's the devil basically. And Tolkien presents that really, really well. So some of the people that strive against him, these Hein and then his children, the stories, the children of Hein, and it's about them. It shows them, of course, they fight against Morgoth, and there's a whole story with that, but it's this tale of human pride where you putting your trust in yourself. These people have really amazing gifts. They're really powerful, amazing guys, and he builds that up. But they're putting their trust in themselves. And Tolkien lays out this tale in just an amazing way, where these really interesting heroes that you can really relate to, that you're like, oh, that's a cool hero, but they trust in themselves like we do. So sometimes we, instead of putting our trust and our heart in God, we put in material things, and I just talked about 2 books that help us with this. But both these books, but the Children of Hein first, is about putting your heart in yourself and your own strength, and it's about people who could really be excused for doing that because they're really awesome people. So while they're fighting the devil, basically, they do it though trusting in themselves. And what I really like about this is, even though the good guys win, they defeat the main person they're fighting, not Morgoth, but one of his underlings. I'm not going to go into it, but he's the main bad guy. And even though they win, they get the goal that they've set themselves. It shows how that by itself, if you're putting your faith in yourself, is not going to end well. It's an amazingly sad story, The Children of Hein. I don't think I've read a fantasy novel that's more dark and sad, and it's just about how and actually Tolkien himself even thought that it's not complete as it is, because the devil just completely and utterly, well, Morgoth, which is like the devil, Morgoth completely and utterly destroys these people's lives, utterly, and you'll see the depths to which that goes to, and they because they're trusting in themselves. And Tolkien, he didn't think the story was complete unless Morgoth got his comeuppance, but it doesn't happen in this book. It happens in the book he never wrote, of everything that happens in Middle-earth at the end of time. So you never get the happy ending. It's just the dark, and it's deep down dark. It's not a book that I reread often because it's so very dark. Tolkien, master storyteller, is still a master storyteller when he's talking about very dark stuff. The next book of his I enjoy better, and it's part of this trilogy of novels he wanted in the whole Silmarillion time frame. It's not as dark as The Children of Hein, and maybe that's why I like it a lot better, but it's still a tragedy. And it's called The Fall of Gadolin, and it's so good. If you like the battles in The Lord of the Rings, like Helm's Deep and those different ones, you'll really like this. It's about battles, and it's about war and warriors, and it's also about people who want to put their trust in themselves and in the good prosperity things that they have, and they put their heart in those things. And Tolkien shows really, really well that this is not going to end well, and he builds it up so well that you see that it's not going to end well, that you as the reader know that these horrible, horrible things are going to happen. So you know before the characters necessarily know, but you don't want them to happen because he's built up so well how good their lives are, how good these things they've put their heart in, how good it all is. So you're really attached to these characters, you're really attached to the things that they're attached to. But you know how it's gonna horribly end before the characters do. So there's that tension in your heart as you're reading it, and I just think it's so good in peeling that away and showing that as a mirror in our lives when we're putting our hearts in these things that aren't going to fulfill us and trusting in our own strength. Kind of the theme of these two is trusting in your own strength. And Tolkien really, really shows that trusting in your own strength is bad. And in The Fall of Gadolin, though, it does have a more hopeful ending than The Children of Hein, because there's no hopeful ending in The Children of Hein. But in The Fall of Gadolin, it has a more hopeful ending in a way, but it's still a tragedy. The Fall of Gadolin, the tale, you can see, even in the title, you can see that it's kind of, very a dark subject matter. But I love this book, highly, highly recommend it, and I really think it helps us put a mirror to ourselves? Are we trusting in the wrong things? And then there is a third Tolkien book in that trilogy I'm just going to mention, even though it's not one of these hope ones that I'm discussing right now, Beren and Luthien. It kind of rounds out that trilogy of Silmarillion stories he was writing, and it's really good too. But it's a happy story, so I'm not going to put it here. It has a happy ending. It's the one of the three that has a happy ending. And the fifth and last story I just wanted to look at really quickly for building up hope in ourselves, peeling away or taking our heart away from these things that don't really fulfill us, and really guarding that true hope, is all these other stories I've been talking about are by Christians, most of them by Catholics. The last story I want to talk about is actually a movie that is by a pagan, and by pagan I don't mean anything derogatory or anything, I mean non-Judeo-Christian, somebody who doesn't believe in the God of Israel. That's all I mean by pagan in this context. That's what it means, is non-Judeo-Christian. That's what pagan means. But so it's from a pagan storyteller. It's a Studio Ghibli movie, actually, if you're familiar with that. It's animated. And it's called Grave of Fireflies. And it's about the nuclear bombing at Hiroshima and Nagasaki from the perspective of a Japanese person. And it is, of course, like all Studio Ghibli stuff, beautifully animated. It also has some Shintoist elements that might not be understandable or might be a little bit disturbing to a Christian audience, that they're not very strongly present and there's nothing you need to worry about. But it's a story told looking at this utterly hopeless situation, and there is no background of Christian hope in it. Like these other stories were by Christian authors. Well, no, this is just the human condition in all its sadness and all its hopelessness, the human condition. And it just is an agonizing watch for, it's about 2 hours. It's an agonizing look. This is the human condition in all, not mediated through the gospel, not mediated through any sort of hopeful lens. And it's super helpful to show us the good news of the gospel, because before we get the good news of the gospel, we need the bad news. And I think that this is not a film that, although I really, really like it, it's a really good film. It's a once-in-a-lifetime watch, because it's so depressing that you're not going to want to watch it twice in your lifetime. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not really. And it really shows, I think, for a Christian audience, I can't speak to how it affects a non-Christian audience, but I really think that it helps us to see that all these little trifles that we value so much, or even really important things like family, that we can't ultimately have our heart rest there. And so I highly recommend, if you haven't seen this movie, watch it, but be prepared, because it's very, very dark. So there it is. There's 5 stories that I think will, if you're trying to have a more hopeful attitude, kind of counterintuitively, there's 5 tragedies that will help you have this more hopeful, not attitude, but live out the virtue of hope better. So I hope you enjoyed that, and some of these stories I'll be discussing more in the future, and I hope that you just have a very blessed day.